You know that moment at every family party when someone says, "Let's play a quick game," and every adult in the room silently regrets being there? That was us, standing in a kitchen that smelled like pumpkin spice and panic, while the kids decided they were now interviewers of truth. They came armed with a notebook, a flashlight, and the kind of confidence only sugar and youth can provide. Each innocent question dug a little deeper. What began as, "Grandpa, what was Halloween like when you were young?" quickly turned into, "Grandpa, is it true you once got banned from the carnival?" By then, Aunt Carol was already halfway through a reenactment of something she swore happened accidentally under a disco ball. Grandpa was trying to explain away a mysterious motorcycle tattoo, and someone, no one's admitting who, spilled caramel corn into the punch bowl. The adults exchanged looks that said we've lost control of this narrative, but the kids were having the time of their lives. And honestly, so was I. Because what's family without a few secrets, a few legends, and at least one story that begins with, "Now, don't tell your mother." If you think the evening had reached its peak of ridiculousness after the fashion show, you clearly haven't seen my family near sharp objects and gourds. The kids were still buzzing. Linda was glowing from laughter, and Marvin, who should never be allowed near an idea unsupervised, clapped his hands and shouted, "You know what this party needs? A pumpkin carving contest." I froze mid-sip. "Marv, the last time you carved anything, you almost invented hand-free spoons." He grinned. "I've learned from experience." That's what I'm afraid of. But the damage was done. Carol had already opened the back door and announced, "We've got 6 pumpkins on the porch." "Come on, people, grab a knife and a dream." Linda beamed. "Oh, this will be fun. Everyone pick a partner." "Linda," I said, "it's after 9. Isn't this usually the part of the night where everyone just eats leftover candy until they regret their life choices?" "Exactly," she said. "But this year, we regret creatively." We divided into teams. Jake and Sophie paired up, Team Pumpkin Power. Carol and Marvin formed an unholy alliance, Team Mayhem, and Linda grabbed Greg, Team Martha Stewart Jr. That left me with Daisy. "All right, kid," I told her, "Team Canine Carvers. You supervise, I'll stab vegetables." She wagged once, which I took as consent. Linda set down newspapers and a mountain of carving tools. "Safety first, everyone." "Define safety," Marvin said, already wielding a serrated knife like he was auditioning for a cooking show. Linda sighed. "No power tools this time." He groaned. "Fine, ruin my art." The kitchen became a symphony of scraping, scooping, and inappropriate levels of competitiveness. Jake had decided to sculpt a superhero pumpkin with lightning bolt eyebrows. Sophie was in charge of design approval and glitter distribution, which meant everything she touched shimmered like fairy dust. Marvin was humming pirate songs while Carol shouted, "Less humming, more carving." Greg was taking it way too seriously, sketching his design on paper first. Linda called him my prodigy and offered unsolicited advice every 30 seconds. And me? I was just trying to keep my pumpkin from rolling off the counter. "Stay still," I muttered. "I'm only slightly dangerous." Daisy rested her chin on the table and sighed, clearly unimpressed. After 20 minutes, the trash can was full of pumpkin guts. The countertops were a disaster, and everyone's hands were orange and sticky. "Time's almost up," Linda called. "5-minute warning," Jake yelled. "Wait!" "My pumpkin needs eyebrows." "Pumpkins don't have eyebrows," I said. "Mine does," he said proudly. Across the room, Carol's pumpkin made a thunk sound. "Uh-oh," she whispered. Marvin looked over. "You decapitated it." "It's avant-garde," she insisted. Greg groaned. "I think mine's a masterpiece." Linda smiled. "It's very symmetrical." "That's because I used a ruler," he said. "Wow," Marvin said. "Nothing screams Halloween fun like geometry." Finally, Linda rang the little kitchen timer she uses for every competition we've ever had. Hands up, knives down. We all stepped back to admire or fear our creations. Jake's pumpkin had lightning bolts, glitter eyebrows, and what looked like a heroic smirk. He named it Super Squash. Carol and Marvin's pumpkin had one eye, a crack down the side, and a smoke-stained candle inside that made it look like it had survived a small explosion. They called it Jack-o'-Kaboom. Linda and Greg's was a pristine, classic jack-o'-lantern, perfectly symmetrical, smiling sweetly. Naturally, it was adorable and smug about it. And then there was mine. A lopsided grin, one triangle eye, and an unfortunate dent that made it look like it had been in an argument with gravity. "Behold," I said, "the pumpkin of mild concern." Sophie giggled. "It looks scared." "Accurate," I said. That's how I feel tonight. "All right," Linda announced. "Let's vote. We'll judge on creativity, execution, and survival." The kids eagerly cast their votes, whispering to each other and holding up sticky fingers like jury members. "Okay," Jake said. "The winner is—" He paused dramatically. "Grandpa and Daisy." "What?" everyone shouted. Jake grinned. "Because it's the only pumpkin that looks like it understands this family." I raised my mug. Finally, recognition for my emotional accuracy. Marvin laughed so hard he nearly dropped his pumpkin. "Kid, you're absolutely right." Linda kissed me on the cheek. "Congratulations, Mr. Grand Pumpkin." "I retire on top," I said. We turned off the kitchen lights and set the pumpkins in a glowing line on the porch railing. They flickered softly in the cool night air, each one ridiculous and perfect in its own way. For a few quiet moments, everyone stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching them. The laughter softened to a hum. The fog had cleared, the sugar rush was fading, and the only sound was the gentle crackle of candle flames. Sophie squeezed my hand. "Grandpa?" "Yeah? This is my favorite Halloween ever," Mine too, I thought. Linda slipped her arm around me. Not bad for a quiet night, huh? I smiled. Remind me to never say those words again. Behind us, Marvin's pumpkin made a soft pop and started smoking again. Linda sighed. Never mind. By 10 o'clock, the sensible part of my brain whispered that it was bedtime. Unfortunately, my family doesn't believe in sensible parts of anything. The house was glowing softly, candles flickering behind our newly carved pumpkins. The adults were half slumped in armchairs, drifting toward that post-cider daze between content and coma. The kids were whispering suspiciously in the corner. When children whisper, it's never about gratitude or homework. I watched them out of the corner of my eye. Jake leaned in close to Sophie, whispering something that made her gasp, then giggle. Max, their little cousin, nodded so vigorously his ghost hat fell off. Uh-oh. Linda noticed too. What are they plotting? She whispered. Probably another haunted house, I said, or a coup. Before she could ask, Jake suddenly stood up and announced, We're going to brush our teeth. The entire room fell silent. Greg blinked. Voluntarily. Yep, Jake said. Dentist approved. Then the three of them bolted down the hall at a speed not typically associated with dental hygiene. Carol chuckled. They're up to something. Marvin grinned. Bet it involves sugar. Or explosions, I said. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Too quiet. Daisy's ears perked up, the canine equivalent of a red alert. Uh-oh, Linda murmured. I know that face. She only does that when someone's in the pantry. I stood up. The candy stash. Every Halloween, Linda and I stash the grown-up candy, the good stuff, in the high cabinet behind the coffee mugs. It's the secret treasure hoard of the Baxter household. Jake and his cousins had clearly discovered the legend. We crept toward the kitchen, moving as quietly as a room full of middle-aged people can, which is to say, not at all. From inside came faint rustling, a whispered shh, and the unmistakable crinkle of wrappers. I pushed the door open slowly. All right, you little sugar pirates, hands where I can see them. Jake jumped, dropping a handful of peanut butter cups. Sophie gasped. Max screamed, "Abort mission," and dove under the table. Linda crossed her arms. And what do we have here? Quality control? Jake offered. Late night inventory management, Sophie said. Preemptive taste testing, Max mumbled from under the table. Marvin laughed so hard he nearly fell against the doorframe. That's my kind of rebellion. Greg tried to look stern. Guys, you know the rule. No candy after 10. But we were hungry, Jake said. Carving pumpkins is hard work. You ate frosting, Linda said. Still counts, Carol whispered to me. Remember when we used to sneak fudge from the fridge? Remember when you got caught and blamed me? I said. Semantics, she said, grinning. Jake looked at us hopefully. Come on, Grandpa. You broke rules when you were our age, right? I opened my mouth to protest, but then I saw Linda smirking. Go on, Henry, she said sweetly. Tell them about the great candy caper of '68. Oh no, I said. "We don't need to." "Yes, we do," she said. "Educational purposes." I sighed. "Fine. Once upon a time, your Uncle Marvin and I tried to steal an entire bag of fun-sized candy bars from our neighbor, Mr. Thompson." The kids leaned in, eyes wide. "It was midnight," I continued. "We thought we were stealthy." "We were not." "What happened?" Sophie whispered. "He had a sprinkler system on a timer," I said. "We learned about humility, hypothermia, and poor planning, all at once." The kids exploded with laughter. Linda smiled. "See? Sneaky plans never end well." Jake grinned mischievously. "So, technically, you can't get mad at us for carrying on family tradition?" "That's not how law works," I said. "Family tradition," Sophie repeated, clapping. Carol snorted. "They've got you there." The kitchen dissolved into laughter again. The kids tried to look sorry, but it's hard to appear remorseful when you're chewing caramel. Linda sighed, but she was smiling. "All right. 1 piece each, then bed 2, Jake bargained. 1.5, Linda said. "Deal." The kids scampered off with their spoils, triumphant. Daisy followed, probably hoping to negotiate her own candy claws. As soon as they disappeared down the hallway, I turned to Linda. "You know they're going to eat all of it, right?" "Of course," she said, "but they'll brush their teeth afterward." Optimistic. Maybe. But let them have the memory. 15 minutes later, the house was quiet again. Kids tucked in the guest room, faint giggles fading into sleep. The adults sat around the dim kitchen, half tired, half giddy, surrounded by mugs and the sweet smell of chocolate. Marvin leaned back. "You realize, Henry, we've officially passed the torch. They're the new generation of troublemakers," I smiled. "And they're off to a strong start." Linda reached over, taking my hand. "You were pretty good at it yourself, Grand Pumpkin." "Retired," I said. "Fully retired." "Sure," she said, eyes twinkling. "Until next Halloween." Or outside, the porch pumpkins flickered in the cool breeze, glowing softly against the dark. Inside, laughter still hung in the air, warm and familiar, like candlelight that doesn't quite fade even after it's blown out. And as I listened to my family's quiet breathing and the faint rustle of candy wrappers from the guest room, I couldn't help but think, every family has its traditions. Ours just happens to involve sugar, chaos, and a little too much fog. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for the world. The house was finally quiet. That rare golden silence that falls when kids are asleep and adults have run out of both energy and opinions. Outside, our pumpkins still glowed faintly on the porch, flickering like cozy orange nightlights for the neighborhood raccoons. Linda was the first to break the peaceful spell. "Henry," she whispered, "do you hear that?" I froze, listening. Nothing but the faint hum of the fridge. "Exactly," she said. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I smiled. It's like nature's apology for parenting. We sat there for a moment, content. The kitchen was soft with lamplight, the table still a mess of mugs, crumbs, and confetti-like candy wrappers. Carol was half asleep in an armchair, and Marvin was snoring softly against the counter, still wearing his glow-in-the-dark skeleton shirt. Linda stretched. "Should we go to bed?" "Soon," I said. "I just want to bask in the quiet for another 45 to 60 years. She laughed softly. "Want to watch something? Just a short Halloween movie?" "Sure," I said. "As long as it doesn't involve zombies, vampires, or anyone under the age of 23 screaming for help." "Perfect," she said. "I'll pick." That's when I should have been suspicious. "10 minutes later, we were back in the living room, bundled under a throw blanket. Linda had dimmed the lights and queued up the streaming service. "What did you pick?" I asked. "Oh, something the kids were watching earlier," she said. "It looked cute." The title flickered on screen. "Haunted Homework. The Curse of the Locker." "Cute," I repeated. "Sure. Nothing says comfort like haunted stationery." She hit play. At first, it was exactly what you'd expect from a kid's Halloween movie. Cartoony ghosts, cheerful music, and dialogue that sounded like it had been written by a committee of sugar cubes. Then, 5 minutes in, the lights on the screen flickered. The soundtrack dropped into a deep rumble, and the cute ghosts suddenly had glowing red eyes. Linda blinked. "Okay, maybe it's a little darker than I remembered." From the hallway came a small voice. "What are you watching?" We both jumped. It was Jake, pajama-clad and wide awake. Behind him, Sophie peeked around the corner. "It's scary," she said excitedly. "Can we watch too?" I groaned. "Absolutely not." "Bedtime." "Please, Grandpa," Jake begged. "We promise we won't get scared." "You said the same thing last year," I reminded him. "Then you refused to go upstairs alone for 3 weeks. That was because the air vent was breathing," he said. "It was the furnace," I said. "It wheezed, Grandpa." Linda patted the couch. "Come on, Henry. Let them stay for 10 minutes. It's family night." And just like that, bedtime was canceled again. 10 minutes later, our cozy Halloween living room looked like a movie theater for insomniacs. The kids sat in front, wrapped in blankets. Linda had a bowl of popcorn balanced on her lap. Daisy was snoring softly against my leg. The movie wasn't terrifying, just weirdly suspenseful for something rated PG. Every time a ghostly locker creaked open, all 3 kids gasped in unison. Jake whispered, "It's behind him." Sophie said, "No, it's in the locker." Max shouted, "It's the math teacher." "Max," I whispered, "use your indoor panic voice." Linda was giggling behind her popcorn. "They're so into it." "Yeah," I said, "I'm thrilled to be reliving my stress dreams from high school." Then the movie hit its first jump scare. The entire room screamed. Kids, adults, and one startled dog who promptly launched herself onto my lap like a furry missile. "Linda!" I wheezed. "The popcorn!" Too late. Half the bowl went airborne in a buttery explosion. We froze as kernels rained down like festive hail. Marvin stirred from the kitchen, blinking. Is it morning? Go back to sleep, Carol called. We're under attack. The chaos settled. The movie rolled on. The kids cuddled closer, still wide-eyed but grinning. Every few minutes, Jake whispered a theory. Sophie clutched Daisy for protection, and Max offered running commentary like a pint-sized film critic. By the halfway mark, we'd stopped pretending to care about the plot. The ghosts were secondary to the giggles. Every exaggerated shriek on screen turned into a laugh in our living room. Then came the final showdown. The haunted locker versus the brave school janitor. Dramatic music swelled. The kids leaned forward, breathless. And just as the ghost made its last boo, the power went out. Total darkness. Sophie shrieked. "The ghost got us!" Jake yelled. "Every man for himself!" Max dove under a pillow. Daisy barked at the void. Linda whispered, "Henry, did you forget to pay the bill again?" "I paid it," I said. "Probably." Carol's voice came from the dark. "Anyone else smell burnt popcorn?" Marvin muttered. "It's starting again." For 30 seconds, the house was chaos. Flashlights flicking on, kids laughing nervously, Daisy racing in circles, and me tripping over a throw pillow in the dark. Then, mercifully, the lights flickered back on. "See?" I said. "Power grid hiccup." "Happens all the time," Jake pointed dramatically at the TV screen, which had frozen on a ghostly face mid-scream. "Coincidence?" "I think not." Sophie gasped. "It cursed the house." "It cursed the popcorn," Carol said, brushing kernels off her lap. Linda shook her head, smiling. "Okay, everyone. Movie's over. Bedtime for real this time." The kids groaned, but they were smiling. Jake said, "That was the best scary movie ever." "You jumped every time the ghost blinked," I said. "Yeah," he said proudly. "That's what made it fun." After they finally shuffled off to bed again, for real this time, Linda and I sat together on the couch. The credits were still rolling silently on the frozen screen. "Well," she said softly, "that didn't go as planned." "When does it ever?" I asked. She laughed. "Never. And that's what I love about it." Daisy sighed, curling up beside us. Outside, our jack-o'-lanterns glowed like little memories on the porch. Linda rested her head on my shoulder. "You know, Henry, I think this might have been our best Halloween yet." I smiled, watching the flickering pumpkins in the window. "It's definitely the loudest." And as the house finally settled into true silence, I thought, you can plan for candy, costumes, and even fog machines. But the best Halloween surprises are the ones that make you laugh long after the lights come back on. The house was quiet again, or at least pretending to be. The movie was off, the lights were low, and Linda and I had just finished the nightly ritual of checking that all the candles were out and that Marvin hadn't accidentally left the fog machine on Volcano. The kids had been tucked in upstairs for almost an hour. I was halfway through convincing myself that sleep was possible when Linda whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first I didn't. Then it came again, a soft, rhythmic thump, thump, creak. I froze. That better not be the fog machine trying to communicate from beyond. "It's coming from the hallway," she said. I sighed, pulling on my robe. Every horror movie begins like this. You'll be fine, she said. You're brave. I'm brave in daylight, I muttered. The hallway was dark, except for the faint orange glow of the porch pumpkins leaking through the window. I could still hear the noise, a creak, a shuffle, then silence. Hello, I said softly. If you're a ghost, you're about 2 holidays early. No answer. I took another cautious step. Daisy padded up behind me, tail wagging, clearly thrilled at the prospect of midnight adventure. Then, suddenly, thump! I yelped. Linda! She appeared at the end of the hall holding a flashlight. Henry, what happened? I'm negotiating with a poltergeist, I said. She shined the light toward the guest room. There. The door was cracked open. From inside came faint giggles. Ghosts don't giggle, I said. That's either the children or Marvin sleepwalking again. We peeked in. Sure enough, all 3 kids were wide awake, sitting in a blanket fort made of chairs, pillows, and one of my good sheets. Jake was holding a flashlight under his chin, telling a spooky story. Sophie gasped dramatically. Max had a candy bar halfway to his mouth. I stepped inside. Well, well, well. The restless spirits of bedtime past, Jake grinned. We were just telling ghost stories. At midnight? Linda asked. It's Halloween, Sophie said. Ghosts like midnight. And dentists don't, I said. Where'd you get that candy? Jake hesitated. Emergency rations. From where? The pantry. Linda stifled a laugh. Oh, Henry, let them finish their story. Fine, I said, but I'm charging rent for use of my sheets. Jake straightened up, flashlight still under his chin. Okay, Grandpa. This one's about the sleepover specter. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds familiar. It's about a ghost, Jake said dramatically, that haunts anyone who tries to go to bed early on Halloween. Linda smiled. A bedtime ghost. Clever Jake continued. Every year, he sneaks into houses, steals socks, and hides remote controls. Oh, I said, that explains our living room. He also eats leftover candy, Sophie added helpfully. Max nodded solemnly. And he makes creaking noises in the hallway so you never sleep again. I folded my arms. You're describing your Uncle Marvin. Linda giggled. Let's not ruin their story. Jake leaned in closer. But the only way to stop the sleepover specter is to tell him a story of your scariest night ever. Sophie gasped. Yeah, Grandpa, tell us your scariest Halloween story. I looked at Linda. She smiled sweetly, which I recognized as a trap. All right, I said, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, but you asked for it. I took a deep breath and began. It was Halloween night, 1973, fog so thick you could lose your own shadow. Marvin and I had decided to camp out behind the high school because someone told us it was haunted. Jake whispered, Was it? Worse, I said. It was infested with squirrels. Linda snorted. I'm serious, I said. We pitched our tent under a tree, roasted marshmallows, and just when we started telling ghost stories, something started rustling above us. Sophie's eyes widened. A ghost? Close. A squirrel the size of a raccoon. It jumped down, landed on our cooler, and made off with all our hot dogs. The kids burst into giggles. I screamed, Marvin screamed, the squirrel screamed. It was chaos. "What did you do?" Jake asked, laughing. "I yelled, 'Drop the meat,'" I said. "It didn't." Linda was doubled over now. "Oh, Henry, that's not scary." "It was terrifying at the time," I said. The kids were crying with laughter. Jake wiped his eyes. "Grandpa, that's the best story ever." "See?" I said proudly. "Scary and educational." "Don't camp under carnivorous squirrels," Sophie yawned. "Tell another one." Linda shook her head gently. "No, sweetheart." "Time to sleep for real," Jake protested. "But what about the sleepover specter?" I smiled. "He only visits kids who stay awake past midnight." "You're safe if you fall asleep right now," Sophie gasped. "Then good night." She flopped onto her pillow instantly. Jake and Max exchanged nervous glances. "You're making that up," Jake whispered. "Am I?" I said, blowing out their flashlight dramatically. They shrieked and buried themselves under the blankets. Linda gave me the look. The one that says you're not helping, but it's funny, so I'll allow it. We tiptoed out, closing the door quietly. In the hallway, Linda whispered, "Sleepover specter, huh?" I grinned. "Hey, if it buys us silence for the next 7 hours, he's real enough." Back in bed, I lay there listening to the soft rustle of settling blankets and the quiet breathing of a house finally at peace. Then, somewhere down the hall, came another creak. Thump. I bolted upright. "Linda?" She didn't answer, already half asleep. The door creaked open slowly, and there stood Marvin, holding an empty cookie tray. "Sorry," he whispered, looking for snacks. I stared at him. "Congratulations, you're the sleepover specter." He grinned. Boo. Morning tiptoed in the way only November mornings can. Soft gray light sneaking through the curtains. The smell of leftover caramel still floating in the air. And a house that looked like Halloween itself had decided to move in rent-free. Linda and I were the first ones up. She padded into the kitchen in her robe, humming, and stopped dead. "Oh, Henry." Every counter was dusted with pumpkin shavings, glitter, and the ghosts of last night's snacks. The fog machine sat in the corner like a guilty appliance. A single candy wrapper drifted off the table, catching the light like confetti at a parade's end. I poured the coffee. "Well," I said, "we survived." Linda smiled. "Barely. But it was perfect." One by one, the family wandered in. Greg looked half asleep. Carol had traded her vampire cape for a bathrobe that might once have been white. Marvin entered humming Monster Mash under his breath and immediately stole the first mug of coffee he saw. Jake stumbled in next, hair wild, eyes bright. "Grandpa, the sleepover specter didn't get us." "Good," I said. "He took the night off after raiding the cookie jar. Marvin gave me a guilty look over his mug. Sophie followed, clutching Daisy. Grandma, we need breakfast. Scaring ghosts is hungry work, Linda kissed her forehead. Coming right up. Within minutes, the kitchen was alive again. Pancakes sizzling, kids chattering, adults trying to remember how to be vertical. The fog machine hissed once, as if to remind us it still existed. Don't even think about it, I told it. While Linda cooked, the kids decided to inspect the aftermath of their haunted house. Jake shouted from the hallway, "Grandpa, your ghost sheet's still hanging from the ceiling fan." "Leave it there," I said. "It's modern art." Sophie called, "One of the pumpkins collapsed." "Mine?" Marvin asked. "No, yours is still smoking," she said. Carol laughed. "That thing's immortal." Linda set plates on the table. "All right, everyone. Eat before the syrup decides to haunt us too." Breakfast with the Baxters is never quiet. Greg recapped the entire movie in unnecessary detail. Carol swore she'd never touch paprika again. Marvin insisted that his pumpkin, though technically destroyed, was ahead of its time. Jake and Sophie made a list of new Halloween traditions, which included 1. Haunted house building. 2. Costume fashion shows. 3. Midnight ghost stories. 4. Grandpa's scary squirrel story. 5. And a candy heist encore, if Grandma allows. Linda read it aloud and laughed until tears rolled down her cheeks. "You forgot number 6, she said, cleaning up. The kids groaned in perfect harmony. When breakfast was over, we started the cleanup together. A family ritual that's less about cleaning and more about reliving the night. Sophie carefully packed the costume box, adding a new label: "Do not open until next Halloween, or when Grandpa forgets." Jake carried the deflated pumpkins to the compost pile, narrating their heroic retirement. Marvin tried to fix the fog machine until Linda confiscated it, and I, broom in hand, just stood there for a minute, taking it all in, the sunlight bouncing off glitter, the faint smell of cinnamon, the sound of my family laughing in every corner of the house. It hit me then. The whole night had been a mess, a masterpiece of chaos and love. The best kind. Later, after everyone had packed up and the cars were pulling away, Linda and I sat on the porch with fresh coffee. The pumpkins still flickered faintly, even in daylight, stubbornly refusing to let Halloween go. She sighed happily. "Well, Grand Pumpkin, what do you think?" I smiled. "I think we threw the world's most chaotic, wonderful Halloween party." The house survived. Mostly. The family's still speaking. Miraculous. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know what I loved most?" "What?" "The kids learning who we really were and who we still are." I nodded. "A bunch of lovable weirdos with a fog machine problem." "Exactly," she said. "And next year, we do it all again." "Next year," I said, "but maybe with fire extinguishers." As the morning sun warmed the porch, Daisy curled at our feet, tail thumping softly. The street was quiet again, just the rustle of leaves and the faint echo of last night's laughter drifting out the window. I thought of Jake's list, of all those silly little traditions, and I realized something. We didn't just tell stories that night, we became one. The kind of story families tell for years, about the Halloween when Grandma moonwalked, Grandpa wore a dog sweater, the fog machine declared war, and nobody cared because everyone was laughing too hard to stop. And if the neighbors still think our house is haunted, well, they're not wrong. It's haunted by joy.